All right, so this is kind of how I do perspectives, and I think I follow after kind of Jack's wisdom in that the tool is for conversation. The conversation is not for the tool. So, what's your name?
My name is Paul.
Paul, great to meet you. My name is JC.
Nice to meet you.
So let's start with a super easy question. What do you think the meaning of life is?
Oh, you got a lot of cards.
You can pick one or two or three or as many as is necessary to kind of form what you think the meaning of life is. Super easy question.
I think to overcome.
To overcome. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, Paul? I loved what you had to say about kind of why the meaning of life is to overcome. It's to kind of overcome kind of the evils that humans, I guess, naturally commit. I don't know what your view on human nature is. So how about I ask you, you can keep this, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Let's ask a similarly easy question. What do you think, how would you define essentially human nature? Again, you can kind of do this in any order, just kind of based on how the conversation goes.
I don't think it's any of these.
Can you say more about that?
I think that there are some people that are good people. I think there are some people that are bad people. If you're going to overcome what is evil, you have to work hard at that. And I don't think so. Maybe human nature is lazy.
Yeah, they follow the path of least resistance.
Rather than good or bad, most people are just lazy. And then some are good and do what is right and overcome.
Hey, so what's interesting about kind of your worldview is it seems to me that you, and I admire this, you kind of have a pretty strong view of what's good and what's evil. I guess my question is, how do you know that kind of good, I know this is kind of abstract, how do you know that good and evil exist at all? How do you determine what's good and what's evil? How do you determine what's true, what's not, versus what's not true?
And people are starving in the streets and we don't care, and that's not right, because there's something about all those things that upset.
That's not how things are supposed to be.
Yes. There's a natural order to things, and that just deeply upsets it.
I see. So that's kind of what determines right and wrong, is kind of what upsets the natural order, you're saying. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Let's be friends. But before that, tell me, what do you think about God? And the reason I mention this is I think you're mentioning the natural order. I don't think it's obvious to everybody that there's a set way that the universe is or ought to be. Some worldviews would kind of say that such a reality would necessitate some kind of creator or creators. So how would you describe your view of who God is?
I think that I've heard people talk about the idea that if there's a world that has a natural order, then there must be someone that put it in order. And so I've heard that before, and so I acknowledge that maybe, even probably, there is a God, or something that isn't us. It seems most probable, right? So I think it means that the good people are winning out over the lazy and bad people.
It's a very hopeful outlook. I hope you know that's not very common these days. Okay, so kind of loosely, agnosticism is your view of God. I appreciate you sharing. So here's what I'm thinking. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and share your perspective on some of these deep questions. Would you mind if you stuck around for maybe 3 or 4 more minutes as I shared my perspective on some of these things?
Sure, go for it.
I appreciate it. You noticed all the signs behind us and kind of the big green Jesus sign. Maybe you've heard of Cru. We are a Christian club, and in light of that, we do believe that God exists. I'm of the position that God exists, and I think that there is a God that is outside of time, space, and matter makes the most sense out of the fact that anything exists at all. If everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist, then the universe needs a cause. The universe needs a creator. I would say, though, that this God is knowable, and he's revealed himself through the person of Jesus. It seems to me that Jesus is making claims to be God. The records say that he died, And then the records say that his tomb was found empty 3 days after his death. People reported that they saw him alive after his death, and people were willing to be put to death for the fact that they saw him. To me, those things communicate that what Jesus was saying about himself and his claims to be God are reliable. Those things are revealed in the Bible, and I think that the Bible is reliable. And in light of the Bible's reliability, if Jesus is telling the truth about being God, well then everything else he says about what human nature is like and about what the meaning and purpose of life, the stuff that he says about these things is true. If he's God and God, can't lie, then Jesus is telling the truth when he says that the purpose of life is to live for God. Something that was important to you was overcoming evil. God is in precisely that business. That's precisely what Jesus did, the Christians say, by dying on behalf of his people and then rising from the dead. Jesus, along with the rest of the Bible, taught that humans are inherently broken in their nature and are estranged from the God of all goodness, and as such do a bunch of terrible things. But there's hope, Jesus says, and you can read about that in the Bible. If these truths are, you're like, yeah, okay, this makes sense to me, I want to investigate further, again, this is a Christian kind of club. The next step would be to investigate yourself the reliability of who Jesus is by reading the Bible. Maybe this Jesus is reliable and you want to put your faith in him. We can talk more about who he is and about that now. But I just wanted formally to invite you to Cru on Tuesday. Whether you are a devoted Christian or not, you're welcome to come and wrestle through these things. This is my perspective on some of the big questions in life. I appreciate you sharing yours. Is there anything else that's kind of on your mind?